The Hoosiers finally learned their opponent in the Empire Classic, and for a second season in a row, Indiana will be playing the defending national champions.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. You are Locked On Hoosiers, the one and only daily IU podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Appreciate you guys tuning in wherever it may be from, and for making us your first listen every day. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. IU finally learned its opponent in the Empire Classic, and it will be UConn, the defending national champions. It was only going to be one of four teams, whether it was the Hoosiers or whether it was UConn, Louisville, or Texas. Indiana and UConn will play at 1 p.m. on Sunday, November 19th at Madison Square Garden. The second game will follow that, Texas and Louisville. The next day, they will play the third place game, Monday, November 20th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by the championship game later in the evening. It's going to be an interesting test for Indiana. It is a UConn team that has lost some pieces to that title-winning team, but at the same time still has plenty of pieces coming back as well. Presumably a top 5, top 10 team coming back. It'll present another difficult challenge for Indiana. And if you're looking at kind of the way too early top 25s, Indiana is starting to load up a bit on some tough games. Number 1, Kansas, they will be playing. Number 3, Purdue. Number 4, Michigan State, they'll be playing. This is ESPN's way too early top 25. I'm not saying it's written, and gives you an idea. Number 5, UConn, they will be playing. So, 4 of the top 5 are going to be opponents for the Hoosiers this season. It's going to be another challenging schedule for Indiana, which is something, again, Mike Woodson has wanted and something that clearly he's doing. He's adding those schools to the schedule. You also have Texas, who is number 24 as a potential opponent. Louisville's really bad. I don't really know why or how they got invited to this. They'll be playing in that third place game. So presumably you're looking at playing 2 top 25 teams in 2 days if the Hoosiers win, which big if. But we're going to learn a lot about Indiana because the Hoosiers will play Wright State on November 16th. Excuse me. That'll be in Assembly Hall. And then they will play these 2 games, UConn on November 19th, Empire Classic, Texas or Louisville, November 20th. And then you're back to Harvard on November 26th in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. You face Auburn, who is a right outside the top 25 team, on December 9th. And you play Kansas on December 16th. So that is a tough non-conference schedule that the Hoosiers are going to be playing in a string of games as well. You could realistically have 4 of 5 games coming against ranked teams, assuming Harvard isn't ranked, which feels like a safe assumption, but there's a not unlikely scenario where they play a UConn, a Texas, Harvard, Auburn, Kansas, and that is 4 top 25 teams, a couple of probably top 10 teams. There's ways it could shake out. It could just as easily be Louisville in that game and present a maybe an easier challenge, but nonetheless, Indiana is beefing up this non-conference schedule, which is something they have wanted to do. I went back to look at some of the recent UConn Indiana games. These 2 teams played in the Empire Classic in 2013, with UConn winning a rock fight. I'm sure a lot of you will probably remember that game. Some of you might remember that game. Yogi Ferrell scored 19 points, but the Hoosiers lose 59-58. Will Sheehy had 12. It was not a pretty game. And UConn was led by Shabazz Napier, who was the only double-digit scorer. He was 10 of 14. The rest of the team was 11 of 39. The rest of the team was awful, and Shabazz Napier kind of carried them. That was back in 2013. These two teams played in 2019 in what I can only describe as peak Archie ball. IU won 57-54. This was also in Madison Square Garden, but it was the Jimmy V Classic. So these two teams have met in this venue a couple times. Rock fight doesn't even feel like the right justification for this. IU won this game 57-54. Nobody scored in double figures. Al Durham had 9 points. Joey Brunk had 9 points. Trace had 8. Justin Smith had 8. This hurts to look at. IU shot 36% from the field, was 2 of 13 from 3. They won the game because UConn had 22 turnovers. They shot 41% from the field. It's not like they shot much better, but just absolutely atrocious basketball. So I beg and plead that this at least be something that isn't going to make me want to gouge my eyes out, which is how I would describe the last two meetings between these two sides. I think it'll be a fun game. It'll be a good litmus test for Indiana, figure out where they are early in the season. They're going to have a couple of those in non-conference play, but we're going to learn where Indiana's at early in the season, and hopefully it's a game that you can take lessons from and apply to games down the road, whether it is a Kansas game or whether it is a Purdue or Michigan State or Big Ten game later on in the season. So an exciting matchup. I want to play the big teams. I want to play these opponents that are going to challenge Indiana and make them get better, and I think that's what Mike Woodson wants as well. So IU, UConn, mid-November, excited for that one. IU football announced an interesting plan in that they are going to explore modernizing Memorial Stadium. We'll talk about what that means, what could be in store, what changes could be happening. We'll do all that here in just a moment. First, let's talk about a new sponsor today, Nutrafol. Not a sponsor we've mentioned before. As I said, they are new to the Locked On Network, but that doesn't mean we don't love them any less. Nutrafol is, if you're like me, you kind of think that hair loss is inevitable. Everybody in my family on my father's side has lost their hair, and I kind of have seen it as an inevitable fate. You can take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their health wellness quiz. Identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Take the first steps to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men. Enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Big thanks to all you guys for making us your first listen every single day. Tomorrow on the show, we will have recruiting updates, a couple of notable women's recruiting updates. We'll get you the latest on the men's side as well. Plenty to talk about, as there always is with recruiting. Let's talk IU football, and not necessarily anything happening in fall camp, but interesting developments happening with Memorial Stadium. So on Monday, Indiana announced that it was going to, quote, take the first steps to explore opportunities and options to modernize Memorial Stadium. What does that mean? Well, they hired or engaged with a group called Nations Group, which is, as they say, one of the country's premier sports planning and advisory firms, basically to help them figure out how to modernize Memorial Stadium. They're going to survey IU athletic stakeholders, which includes ticket buyers, fans, donors, business leaders, others along the way as well. They're going to receive a secure online survey asking for feedback on a wide array of topics related to modernizing the facility and game day experience for Hoosier fans. Among the topics they say will be discussed is a reimagined concourse, new social gathering spaces, upgraded concessions and restrooms, and a series of enhanced premium seat options and locations. Scott Dolson had some quotes in this as well. Here's kind of the genesis of it. Quote, we're thrilled to begin the process of gathering input from Hoosier fans about a facility project that would transform how our fans enjoy Indiana football game days. We're excited to be able to partner on this subject with Nations Group, which has experience and market knowledge to help us inform a capital facility project of this magnitude. Look, we can complain about IU football and kind of the state of it all we want, but the program is putting money into the athletics program is putting money into the football team, the facilities, the stadium. It was recently announced that they were going to be getting a big weight room, their own weight room. It wasn't announced how much money. It was a gift from Jay Wilkinson, who might be a familiar name for some of you. He donated $10 million for the volleyball and wrestling facility where games and matches or meets are held. In 2017, he donated $1 million to IU football in 2012 to renovate what is the current weight room. This is expected to be done in 2024. It's going to be, I believe, at the north end zone all the same, but it's going to be done in 2024. Again, their own weight room, which matters in recruiting. How much it matters depends on who you ask. It varies from recruit to recruit. Probably not quite as much as people think, but at the same time, when you don't have those bells and whistles, people will recruit against you. IU's also announced what they call 8 field level premium seats for IU football this year. They are, exactly what I described. They're basically a suite that $20,000 per season. It has 16 tickets. You kind of get the experience of being in a suite and having drinks and refreshments and your own little area, whatever that, however much you value that. Comes out to about $200 per person per game with those 16 tickets. What all this is, what I'm trying to say basically, is IU is trying to put money back into the football program. The football program has taken its lumps and it has struggled on the field. And we had a lot of discussions at the end of last season about what the future of it is. And we did, and every dayers way back then will remember, but you were kind of stuck in a cycle where Tom Allen said they needed more NIL money. Well, fans weren't going to give more money to a program not going in any direction. And the program wasn't going to kind of buck that trend until it started getting more funding, whether from the athletics department, whether from fans. And you were just stuck in this cycle where nobody really wanted to invest money. Credit to the athletics, the IU athletics for being the one to take the jump and start investing this money and hoping to break that cycle a little bit and get fans a little bit excited about IU football. Now there's still a responsibility for the team itself to show up and create some excitement as well, but the athletics department is trying. Kudos to them, and hopefully it leads to more fans getting invested, both kind of as a fan and as a NIL supporter. What does modernizing a stadium look like, though? Well, I have some ideas. I read some discussions, and other ideas were listed. We'll run off some things, some discussions, take a look at what modernizing a football stadium looks like. We'll do that here in a moment. So it bears mentioning, or it's worth mentioning, that there were a couple of things IU mentioned in this. A reimagined concourse. IU's concourse now is bland. And bland is kind of the word I have for a lot of about IU football Memorial Stadium. Kind of look at it. It looks bland is the word that comes to mind. It almost looks like a concrete jungle. And I don't mean it in the way that Jay-Z meant it in mind. I mean it in that it just looks like a bunch of concrete without much life to it. And so I think there are ways to liven it up. New social gathering spaces would be fine. There isn't really anywhere to do that around the stadium right now. That kind of used to be that on the south side when it was an open area, but with it being closed, I don't know how much that exists anymore. Concessions being upgraded is an easy one, same as restrooms. You can always kind of modernize that. I don't know how much in general that will change things. I don't think IU's concessions are really outdated. I think there's a lot of other things that need to be addressed. I started by just kind of looking around at newly constructed stadiums, literally modern stadiums. Couple things jumped out. I think one of the biggest ones is just UAB is one of the newest stadiums, and you see this at a lot of places. A bigger scoreboard. And that is kind of a, I guess, buzzword or cliche answer. Anytime there's a new stadium, it's, oh, look how big our scoreboard is. And IU doesn't have a small one necessarily, but there's a lot of room where it could get bigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the things that they do. Stretch that scoreboard out more across that north side of the end zone. Just make it look bigger and make it hard to miss and incorporate that into the stadium more. Something else I noticed looking at, I also looked around at a lot of other bigger schools, football schools, LSU's, Alabama's, Clemson's, Miami's, just all the bigger football schools. Looked at their stadiums and tried to get a sense of what looks nice. Something I noticed, and again, another thing I wouldn't be surprised if they improve upon, the lighting just looks so much better at those stadiums than it does at Indiana's. LSU was one that really jumped out, as well as Alabama. It just looks nicer when it's lit up at night, and IU still has an appeal to it, certainly. When you have a full stadium at night with the lights on, it doesn't look bad, but it stuck out to me how much more of an improvement the atmosphere looks and feels when you have better lighting. That is an expensive undertaking as well. So that was something that kind of jumped out to me when looking at a lot of these places, is how much it's not even necessarily just brighter lights, but LED lighting, more coverage across the stadium, things like that. We mentioned the larger scoreboard, actual seats instead of bleachers in at least in some sections. There is on the north side, I know, a section that has actual seats, but I think everywhere else is just bleacher seating. I would not be surprised if that changes and they might put in more actual seats. The problem with that is it probably lessens the capacity of the stadium, but it's probably a little bit more inviting to non-college students to come to games and not have to sit on bleachers. I've gone to IU games in not November, but I went to the IU Northwestern game in 20. It was freezing, and sitting on those metal bleachers when it is freezing is 10 times worse. Everything is numb. There wasn't another option. So I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in actual seating, maybe at the middle section on one side of the stadium, on the side opposite the students, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's instituted. Sound system upgrade is what I saw mentioned. Admittedly, I haven't been to Memorial Stadium since 2019, since before COVID. So I don't know what the stadium sounds like in that regard. I never thought it was bad, but that could be an area they look to upgrade. I also saw somebody mention escalators for some of the seats higher up. Theoretically, yeah, I'd be in support of that. I don't know practically if that is, or realistically, if that's something that they could do. Maybe elevators, something like that. But it is quite the trek up the stadium to those high up seats. And perhaps you could make it a little bit easier. I don't know how realistic that is. But what do you guys want to see? Put in the comments down below. What do you guys want to see modernized about IU football in the Memorial Stadium? I think it's a perfectly fine stadium for IU football. I also think that it's wise that they're looking to modernize it because it has felt honestly a little outdated at times. They've done a good job in recent years of closing the south side of the stadium and just gradual upgrades that we mentioned. But those have been more about like getting fans in, and this one feels a lot more about enhancing the game day experience, which I think is different and a positive. It's going to be a lot of things that you didn't think of, but you go to a game after they do this and you're like, oh, that's so much more convenient. That's what this is for, and I think that's going to pay dividends for Indiana. So again, let me know what you guys think. If there's anything that had jumped out to you, for those of you that have attended games more recently than I have, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks as always for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. Every dayers. Again, tomorrow on the show, we'll talk IU recruiting men's and women's basketball. We're going to do that lineup show a week where we talk about men's basketball, maybe women's basketball lineups we want to see that the Hoosiers can put out on the floor that we're most excited to see. So be in store for all that this week. Follow us on Twitter if you have not already at LO_Hoosiers. Subscribe, leave those ratings and reviews, all that stuff. As always, guys, hope you have a fantastic Tuesday. Most importantly, LEO.